Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Laura Bush.
Thank you for all of our brothers and sisters for being here this morning, and I'm very happy to see that some of you wore the proper clothing. We were also going to be joined by Clarence Wolfguts, the last of the living Oglala Sioux code talkers who testified in committee yesterday, and we had a seat for him, but before we got the clearance to bring him over here, in the best tradition of Indian people not being seen when they don't want to be seen, we can't find him. But he's true story. True story. In any event, hopefully he'll show up yet. Our morning will begin with the national anthem, and we have a very special treat. We will hear from the beautiful sounds of the Cherokee National Youth Choir, which will perform the anthem in both English and Cherokee languages. I know the Principal Chief of the Cherokees, Chad Smith, is extremely proud of this young group. Thank you. Please proceed.
Ichiko heisna, chukichaska, chusi haska uli, helistichi gigoha, najatli hadusta, nana lenosi, chogatosta uno, leatela. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Uo tu jagalalohi ganula ganoleska jekwajai odalai udawatahista amayatli igidoli chei digada geyugesesti nika amayatli igidoli chei digada geyugesesti nika amayatli.
Welcome to the center of the free world. What was once the land of the Chickahominy, the Pamunkey, and the Mattaponi tribes has become known now as the home of the world's greatest democracy. As you know, our Constitution's framework, a good part of it, was taught to Benjamin Franklin around the council fires of the Iroquois Confederacy. Many people in American history do not know that. We didn't get to write the history books, as you know. Today is a historic day indeed, because in this very room, the East Room, in July 1970, President Nixon issued his special message to Congress on Indian affairs, which laid the foundation for Indian self-determination and set the course of federal Indian policy for the 35 years since. You should know, as I do, that our current president, President George W. Bush, supports that policy and has affirmed those principles repeatedly in his term. In the history of this great nation, we all know Indian people have suffered much. As a result, they are rather wary of promises given to them by anybody in public office. 600 treaties have been signed. Literally every one at one time or another was broken. And so I'm like you. I like to listen when people run for office, but unlike me, perhaps some of you, I go back and check the record after the election too to see if those promises came true. Indian people in our culture smoke the pipe and send our voice on the smoke to the great Creator so he will know we speak the truth. 4 years ago, I was invited by then-candidate George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Senator Domenici, who is with us this morning, to meet with 14 tribal leaders in New Mexico. I listened very, very carefully when the President talked about what he wanted to do for children, all children, including Indian children, and you know of the No Child Left Behind program. Having come from a dysfunctional home, as many of you did, that was riddled with disease or alcoholism or many other things, that proposal was of great interest to me. Growing up, like some of you, I knew the loneliness of orphanages and hunger too. But then candidate Bush continued, and the more he spoke about our Indian children, the more I realized he wasn't going to be hollow promises. He talked about putting more resources in Indian school construction. I used to teach school, and I know some of the Indian schools are in badly need of help. Drafty, windy, peeling paint. Young children can't be expected to learn in that kind of an environment. So I was particularly interested in his promise to add resources to school construction. And I want to tell you this morning, the President of the United States, George W. Bush, has put in 3 times more than any other administration in history into Indian school construction. Very simply, he kept his promise to us. And yesterday, in the last few days on the mall, we've seen so many bright and beautiful children, Indian children, that we know the future is going to be better than it was for us, better for them than it was for us because of some of the efforts of our President. Please help me welcome President George W. Bush.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you all. Please be seated. Welcome to the White House. Laura and I are so honored that you're here, and we're honored to be with you. This week, during one of the largest gatherings of American Indians in our nation's history, we celebrate the legacy of the first people to call this land home. And we celebrate the opening of the National Museum of the American Indian, a unique and beautiful place that will introduce generations of visitors to a strong and living tradition. That museum is a long time in coming, but it now stands in a place of honor, exactly where it belongs, on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I'm honored to call Ben Nighthorse Campbell a friend. He is a strong, strong leader. He is a proud Indian and a proud American. He represents the best of public service. And I appreciate his wife, Linda, being here as well. Thank you, friend. Plus, he's a pretty fine athlete. I appreciate Secretary Gail Norton, Secretary of the Interior, for being here. Got other members of my administration involved with Indian affairs who are here, and they should be here. After all, they're with the leaders of sovereign tribes. Dave Anderson, Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs, Department of Interior. Vicky Vasquez, Assistant Deputy Secretary of the Office of Indian Education. Dr. Charles Grimm, Director, Indian Health Service, Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you all for coming. I'm proud to be here with Senator Ted Stevens. Senator Stevens, Chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, strong backer of the American Indian, as is Senator Domenici and all the other senators who are here. Appreciate you all coming. I'm honored that the members of the House are here. Richard Pombo, Chairman of the House Resources Committee, J.D. Hayworth, Co-Chairman of the Native American Caucus, along with Dave Kildee of Michigan, Co-Chairman of the Native American Caucus, Congressman Tom Cole from Oklahoma, and other members of the Congress. Proud you're here, and thank you for coming. I'm honored to have distinguished tribal leaders here today. Thank you all for coming to Washington, D.C. We're proud you're here. I appreciate Sheila Burke, the Deputy Secretary of the Smithsonian Institute. I thank Rick West, the Director of the National Museum of the American Indian, for being here as well. I want to thank the Indian members of our United States military for joining us today. Thank you for your service. Finally, I want to thank the Cherokee Choir for filling the East Room with such beautiful music. Thank you all, and welcome to the White House. The museum's location on the Mall is fitting because the American Indian experience is central to the American story. That story has involved great injustice against Native peoples and great contribution by Native peoples. We remember Sacagawea's presence with Lewis and Clark. What a heroic woman she was. We remember the patriotism and bravery of the Code Talkers in World War II. We're still looking for Clarence Wolfguts. We also remember all the Native Americans who fought to defend America, including the 17 American service personnel we just recognized here. Native Americans have supported this country during its times of need, and their contributions have made America stronger and better. Decades ago, there were some who viewed American Indians as the vanishing Americans, people on the margins of our national life. Yet the exhibits in the new museum and the museum itself carry a different message. Many of its staff and curators are Native Americans, and the exhibits are created in close consultation with the tribes. The National Museum of the American Indian shows how your ancestors once lived, and it does much more than that. It affirms that you and your tribal governments are strong and vital today, and provides a place to celebrate your present achievements and your deepest hopes for the future. It allows all Americans to experience the rich culture of the American Indian. Native American cultures survive and flourish when tribes retain control over their own affairs and their own future. That is why earlier this morning I signed an executive memorandum to all federal agencies, reaffirming the federal government's long-standing commitment to respect tribal sovereignty and self-determination. My government will continue to honor this government-to-government relationship. Long before others came to the land called America, the story of this land was yours alone. Indians on this continent had their own languages and customs, just as you have today. They had jurisdiction over their lands and territories, just as you have today. And these sovereign tribal nations had their own systems of self-governance, just as you have today. The National Museum of Indian Affairs affirms that this young country is home to an ancient, noble, and enduring native culture. And all Americans are proud of that culture. Like many Indian dwellings, the new museum building faces east toward the rising sun. And as we celebrate this new museum and we look to the future, we can say that the sun is rising on Indian country. Welcome to the White House. May God bless you. Thanks for coming.